There we are. Woo! All right, day 2 of our
Day
Live Well
2.
Happy Hour on healthy boundaries. Woohoo! Oh my gosh. Welcome back. We are so excited. And honestly, Cindy and I are just bashing around ideas of what we're going to share in this video. And I'm really excited. So let's take it away, Cindy. You.
All right. I have one statement to say, just to kind of to promote awareness and to just get you thinking about things.
Yeah.
So love cannot exist without boundaries. That's a really huge statement. And people really sometimes are not understanding it. So let's talk about that, Jennifer. So
this is huge. I can't even, we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, and honestly, I was like, I wish we were recording at that moment, because it's just like, eyes wide open, jaw drop. You're like, this is one of those things. I remember learning this somewhere along the way, and it was such a huge thing, because at first it can be like, oh, don't like that. What do you mean love can't exist? And it's like, yeah, because this is self-love. Boundaries is about loving yourself, and you can't give what you don't have. So you actually can't be as loving as you are meant to be to the world, the community, another person, whatever. You can't give what you don't have for yourself. So setting boundaries is one of the ways that we show love for ourselves. And I'm like, this is such a great way to sort of launch this conversation, because this is going to be one of the most loving acts that you do for yourself. And it might not feel loving in the beginning, but I'm telling you, in the end, the result is massive, like game changer.
Yeah, and when you're first starting to, how can I say it, to just develop your boundaries.
Yeah.
When you're first starting to do that, it is uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It's work.
Yeah.
All self-growth, all self-development is a little bit of work.
Yep.
But it really is worth it, because it just gives you a sense of, well, you don't get overwhelmed, or you don't get, all those feelings that go with when you say yes to somebody and you don't really mean yes.
Yeah.
You get that, oh, why did I do that? Why did I say that? When, when you're not, when you've turned around and gone home, like, oh, I can't do that. I don't have enough time. Why did I do that?
Yeah, exactly.
So, it's boundaries are essential. Essential.
It's such a bold statement. Cindy, say it one more time, because I want people to just really grasp this. Because it's huge. I know it.
Love cannot exist without boundaries.
I'm telling you, it's provocative. It really is, because it provokes us to think of, I guess what I would have to say is, when we go against our boundaries, it's one of those moments where we're actually being mean to ourselves.
Yeah, we're not respecting ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no respect for ourselves at that point in time. Yeah. So let's just go over the meaning of a boundary, because
let's do that.
Everybody has different ones, I guess, and different boundaries in different areas of their lives.
Yeah.
So personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, limits that a person creates to identify a reasonable, safe, and permissible way for other people to behave towards them.
Yeah.
And how they respond to somebody when that person crosses your boundary.
Right.
So let's just do an example. I'll just do an example in my life. My boundaries are kind of blurry with my kids. So I find that, it's hard to say no.
Mm-hmm.
I get all the reasons that it's a good thing to say no, but that's one of the ones that I really have to work on.
Yeah.
So what I've learned through going through my boundaries is that I need to have an excuse ready. Because I was one of these people that if I was talking on the phone and somebody asked me, can you do this? I was automatically, yes, sir, I can do this. Because I was in that if I can't say no.
Right.
Like that's not very nice. I can't say no.
Right.
And I'd feel guilty that I'd say no. So it's very empowering when you learn to say no and not feel the guilt and not feel that people aren't going to like you anymore. Because actually people respect people with boundaries.
Yeah. But I will say this much, and I like that you say that, be mindful that if you didn't have boundaries and now you're establishing boundaries, they won't respect you yet.
No, and they're not
going to like that. They're used to you being who you've always been, right? And people love what they're used to. So they're going to treat you the way they always have. And then all of a sudden you implement something new that makes them uncomfortable, right? And they're probably going to be maybe it gets a little loud, maybe it gets, what they're going to come at you as to try and get you to go back to where you used to be. And so you have to be prepared for that, right? And I say that with all the love in the world because it's so doable. And man, on the other side, that feels empowering like no other.
And if you haven't had very good boundaries, then people are just going to like kind of the first time you say no, they're not going to believe that.
Right. So, and recognize they're going to keep coming at you. They're going to keep, because they know they can wear you down because maybe, they wore you down in the past. Particularly, this is a great one for kids or family stuff. Even work for that matter, actually. There's certain places in work where people can wear you down.
And to have an excuse, I'll say an excuse, but it's your right too, but to have an answer, because if you're taken by surprise, then sometimes you just react. Yeah. But if you can just stop and think about it, yes, buy time. So my favorite thing is, well, sounds good, but leave it with me for a little bit and I'll think about it. Yeah. They don't. Or
I'll check my calendar and get back to you. I got to check with my husband and see, if he's got any plans. Or there's ways. And I think that's really, really important. If you're uncomfortable with the no for now, right, saying no right away, that you can buy the time to gain the strength to then say no. Or sometimes they don't even come back. I find sometimes, you put out, let's say, that little delay, and then they go do it themselves anyway. Right? I mean, it needs to get done, and they just go do it, or they find somebody else to do it. So sometimes it just, the problem kind of takes care of itself by putting that little delay in there. It's brilliant. And this is what
and you do get used get used to saying no. Like after you practice like the excuse thing a little bit, you do feel the empowerment, and you do feel like, oh my gosh, this feels really good. Like I'm taking care of myself. Yeah. Then it gets easier to say, and people take it better also because you have developed a little bit of stronger boundaries. So you're able to say, no, I don't think that's quite what I want to do. Yeah. Or no, and not give an excuse.
Right.
No thanks.
Well, it's funny because in business coaching, I talk to people, it's like building up the strength through mini successes, right? So you kind of, you're feeling your way in, dipping your toe in the water with boundaries, and maybe you do the delay tactic kind of thing, right? You're prepared with that little something that just, feels good for you, right? It can sound a little bit different or whatever, but you create that delay and then you see on the other side, oh, wow, the world didn't end. I didn't have to lose a friend over that, or if I did, they really weren't necessarily somebody who needed to be in my life anyway. But anyway, I digress. That you recognize like, wow, okay, like that worked out and that felt good and all of that kind of stuff. And then through that success, and then you do it again and you do it again, you actually gain strength. This is kind of like going to the gym for your muscles, right? I mean, it's like kind of like gaining flexibility or gaining strength takes time. You're feeling stronger and more courageous and more brave to really lean into this comes with the experiences and exposures too. So I like that.
And you will have to be uncomfortable at first.
Absolutely.
When you're first, like I remember the first, because I was a people pleaser, like everybody. The more on my plate, the more I was anxious and like, but didn't know how to stop it.
Yeah.
But
it is a freight train.
It is a freight train. It is a freight train. And with family, it's a hard to set boundaries sometimes. And I remember the first time I said no to somebody on the phone, and there was this big pause. And then there was, what do you mean? And I'm thinking, and then I'm about to cave because I'm just practicing.
Right.
So I'm about to cave and go, oh, never mind. I'll do it. But I stuck to it. I just repeated.
Oh, you just froze.
I need to think about it. I just repeated that.
Yeah.
Did I freeze?
You just froze just for a second. No, didn't miss much. Didn't miss much. I think people understand. You said it, and then you pause, and then you said it again. Like, you just repeat that same phrase. I'm telling you, and it works.
There was three responses from the person that I was trying to establish a boundary with. Yeah. And finally, the third one, they didn't like it, and it was very obvious to me that they didn't like it. Yeah. But I kept self-talking myself, like, you're fine. Just repeat it. Yep. Yep. But it was I remember it was very uncomfortable. It was work. Yeah. It was very uncomfortable. Yeah. But it was necessary. It was necessary. Yeah.
And I think that we all get to the point where, I guess what I would love people to understand is, don't wait till you're desperate. But if you do, I mean, that's not the end of the world. But if you could play with these concepts before we're in a desperate situation in an area of our life, it would be fantastic. That's why, I mean, this is such a needed conversation. Something that I found personally really good for me was, I played with my boundaries in my business. Now, it was like a business that I started, like outside of everything else. And part of me seeing the results I wanted to see in my business required boundaries. And I found it a really safe space because it wasn't with family, right? So that really worked for me. And it's just something to think about. It's like, what would be an area where you could start to strengthen that muscle? You're still going to eventually have to do it with the family or whatever it is, right? And that it's going to be maybe a little bit uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, I had so many, let's say, mini successes over here that I was strengthening those muscles, that when I actually did it, like actually, establish some boundaries and work through them, I was way more prepared. And I don't know if that's something that can happen for other people. Obviously, I know it can. It just depends on what's kind of going on in people's lives. But that was huge for me.
I found it very interesting, the aftermath of flexing your boundaries. The aftermath in respect that I was getting comments like, "Oh, Cindy must be overworked," or she must be like, "Oh, she's not feeling well," or like they have to have an excuse why I said no.
Yeah. Well, our brain, right? We know brain psychology. That's what our brain wants to do. Our brain will always create a story or a narrative to make sense of what's happening. It doesn't matter what it is. So the person that's establishing the boundaries has a narrative about what's happening for themselves and for others. We're creating a dialogue, almost, a monologue of what's happening with other people. Like, they must be feeling blah, blah, blah. We'll project what we're thinking onto other people, but the reality is they're doing the same thing. They're creating a story about why we are or aren't. And I think that's part of, because maybe they'll say that to you. And there's a really great quote, and I will not do it justice. I am so good at quotes usually, but this one I won't necessarily do well. But the concept of, don't spend your time or energy trying to explain yourself to someone who is wanting to not understand you. Do you know what I mean? They're determined to misinterpret what you say or what you do. It's not going to make sense to someone that, I'm just trying to, establish some boundaries to be happier. They're not going to get it. it isn't for you to explain to them what you're doing. They will get it over time. Yeah. Right? I mean, people will use that against you almost, right? That you're trying to do something to be healthy. Right? I mean, they'll almost use that as ammunition against you. And, you know, you set yourself up for failure. I don't need to explain why I do what I do for my own health.
That's right.
If somebody else has an issue with that, talk to the hand. That's your problem. You manage you. I'll manage me to the best of my ability. And I'm constantly trying to get better at that. But sometimes it's messy. Sometimes we do a good job at it, and sometimes that was a train wreck. Like, it is what it is. Be okay with that too.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some areas? What are some boundaries? What are some like areas of our life, Cindy, that
So what would be like a material boundary? It would be like somebody borrowing your car, somebody borrowing your tools. Like that would be like, so, and we all know.
How many times have I had people borrow my books and I never get them back?
That's right.
Right?
So so that is a good boundary to establish for yourself, because let's just go with the tool thing. Yeah, you know, like you forget where they are, you may never get them back, you know. But like if you're not comfortable lending your tools, then don't do it. They're your tools, right? Like, you know, like you take responsibility for that, because if you're getting, you know, like if you're resenting people from always borrowing your tools, then how are you going to overcome that resentment? Well, why not lending tools out would be a good thing, because you just eliminated that.
I can throw in here, I remember when we first moved back, I think it was relatively soon after we moved back to Nova Scotia, and we had friends come from away for a visit. And they asked us and I don't even know how this all played out, but clearly I did not have any boundaries. But anyway, they had asked to borrow our car while they were here. And I'm like, wow, I got to be honest. We gave them our car. And I still to this day would say, I will never do that again. And not because I wouldn't give my car like to somebody. It was not even about that. It was like, wow, I would never ask somebody for, do you know what I mean? Like, but there's a thing of, I can't put my measuring stick of life and what I would do or wouldn't do, and I can't place it on someone else and assume they're going to act or behave or whatever the same way to me. Like that just, anyway, it was like, wow, that was a massive ask in my opinion, because it's not like we were in the position to go buy another car if all of a sudden they got wrote off. And was this someone who, if they wrote it off, they were going to buy me a new car? Because I got to be honest, probably that car at the time probably only had PLPD. So had they hit a deer, had they run off the ditch, whatever, wasn't going to give me a new car. I'm like, wow. It was really fascinating. And I go over that just as a great example of, that was like, I had to take some time to say, will I do that again? And it's not about them. That was totally on me. Of course they asked. That's on them. But for me,
people have different boundaries too, Jennifer. So they probably don't have a issue with lending their car to people.
Maybe.
But it's all about respect. Like I'm going to respect your boundaries because they're your boundaries. They're not mine.
Yeah.
And just because you have one set, I don't know, just, you know, like I might be fine with lending my car.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this much. They weren't coming to Nova Scotia to drive around town. They went to PEI, went through New Brunswick. This was like, I might have went to Cape Breton. I have no idea. I'm like, this was a big ask in my opinion.
It was a big ask.
At the time, it seemed like a huge ask, right? And it's all good. But it was a real stretch and a real eye-opener. You're absolutely right. Other people have different boundaries than we do. Yeah. And that's why it's so very important to be clear on ours. And that one totally caught me off guard. And I didn't have boundaries at the time, obviously, in that area, and gave me a lot to think about. But anyway, so what's another one, Cindy?
Physical boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think that is?
Well, physical boundaries, I'm thinking, and trust me, you guys, we're not scripted here. Like, I know.
No, exactly.
That's throwing me under the bus right now. I could go look it up really quickly, but physical boundary, I'm thinking of space. I'm thinking of, sometimes personal space when you get someone talking right in your face. It could be, that's not necessarily sexual, but it could be. I mean, it's all like boundaries of space. I guess that's what I would.
It would be like touching. It would be.
Some people are huggy. Some people are like, that, like I said, they talk right in your face, or
like not respecting your privacy, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay, so what about mental boundaries?
Yeah, I don't know, where would you put that one? Because I'm trying to think.
It goes with your thoughts. It goes with your values, your opinions. Are you easily suggestible?
Yeah. Some people are very.
Are you more a sheep than you are a?
Oh man. Oh my gosh. Okay, there are going to be people watching this video right now that know that I talk about sheep. Okay, so that I love.
I like that.
I do. I love the analogy, and the reality is, the masses are sheeps, right? I mean, we follow, and that's okay. That's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's just at some point we get to decide: do you want to lead? I'm
gonna read something here, though.
Yeah, please.
Because I want to make sure that I get all of it out. So, mental boundaries apply to your thoughts, values, and opinions. Are you easily suggestible? Do you know what you believe? And can you hold on to your opinions?
Yes.
Like if you have, like
if someone challenges you.
Wait. Yeah. Can you listen with an open mind to someone else's opinion without becoming rigid?
Okay.
I love that.
Can I just say that right now on social media, there's lots of stuff going on where everybody's attacking everybody's thing, and nobody's just like, can you listen to a differing point of view and be okay that you can agree to disagree? Does everything have to be, an attack? That, because somebody else says something, then that's saying that my thought's wrong, so I've got to rise to the challenge, or, you're in attack mode, or, whatever. It's like, it's not about that at all. It's like being really okay with what you believe doesn't mean you have to attack anybody else's beliefs. Granted, social media is that platform sometimes.
and what you just said, I do have to bring up something too, because a lot of people think that by setting boundaries, they have to be aggressive.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do I agree. You can become aggressive if you're taken by surprise.
Yes.
And fight or flight kind of thing.
Yep.
You look at it like, oh my God, am I going to have to say yes? And that goes back to have an excuse ready so that you don't react in an aggressive way, because you don't want to wreck a friendship just by, if it doesn't need to be. Right.
Another one that, you're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be aggressive. I find typically it will go one way or the other. Typically, if there's a situation where perhaps a mental boundary has been stepped over, then you'll go one of either way. You'll either come out like a caged animal, or you might go really quiet.
Yes.
Right. And I mean, again, there's all, in between. But when you're really just comfortable with where you're at and comfortable with that boundary, because it's not about trusting somebody else's opinion or buying somebody else's opinion. It's just being okay with yours and trusting the fact that you can have a differing point of view without having to get all riled up about something, or whatever. I guess you're solid in your own space. And you feel safe in that space with what you believe, and at the same time being open that can evolve too. Because has anybody ever said to somebody that's like, oh my gosh, I never looked at it that way, right? I mean, our perspective has the affinity to kind of evolve over time, because as you hear something a different way, you're like, wow, thank you. I never thought of it.
I love hearing everybody's opinions.
Yeah. I do too. I mean, granted, there's ones where, like I say, social media can be the platform where a lot of polar things, like there's difficult conversations, politics, religion, whatever. Some people can really go off the deep end on some of that stuff, and that's fine. To each their own. But generally speaking, right? I mean, this is where being really, I don't know, if you're confident in your opinions, your values, whatever, then you're not so
and respectful.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So the next one is emotional boundaries.
So, and I'm okay, again, not scripted, you guys. It's clearly, okay, so I'm thinking of emotional stuff. I'm thinking about sometimes, like, I see this a lot of people with loose boundaries or no boundaries, how you can take on everybody's emotions and, you know what I mean? Like, and criticism is an attack or, things like that. I don't know. Is that what the definition of emotional?
It's being able to distinguish, separating your emotions from the responsibility of somebody else's.
Yes.
So it's like an imaginary line or force field that separates you and others. Healthy boundaries prevent you from giving advice, blaming, or accepting blame. Healthy boundaries. So that's
that is huge. How many people, again, oh my gosh, and I suspect there's people going to be watching this video, they'll be thinking the same thing, that, or at least when we talk about this, that when somebody can make them feel guilty.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that because I got to be honest, I was raised, in a family thing, like even my grandmother, like it was just, there was some guilt that trickled down. Like you were held in place through fear and guilt to some degree. I wasn't a lot because I really was a push against the grain kind of gal, but that was so in place and it's still in my head. And that I used to think that somebody could make you feel guilty or someone could make you feel anything about anything. And I guess I was very easily influenced by things that they would say, or I take it personally or whatever. And when I started to really lean into being curious about that and recognizing that someone can't make me feel guilty, only I can take that on. And if that's true, which it is, then how can I work through that emotion? How can I maybe feel like, maybe it's like I start to feel guilty and I can get curious about that and really start to talk to, like, do some self-talk and talk your way out almost of like, there's nothing here to feel guilty about. Like I'm standing my ground about whatever. And, I don't necessarily need to, that's their thoughts, feelings, whatever. You know what I mean? And they might be projecting that onto me, but I don't actually have to take it on. That's a tough one. What's your thoughts on that, Cindy?
Well, I'm just going to read a little bit more here because I really like this statement too. So healthy boundaries protect you from feeling guilty for someone else's negative feelings or problems or taking other comments personally. So that's a good one too. Yeah. High reactivity suggests weak emotional boundaries.
Yeah.
Healthy emotional boundaries require clear internal boundaries, knowing your feelings and your responsibility to yourself, not others, to yourself.
This is getting back to really knowing yourself. And I'll say, so here's a really good tool. If anybody's like, I don't know how to do this, right? Like so far, this sounds like some areas that I could do some work in. You know what I mean? Like maybe this would really impact my life if I was to tighten up some of these areas, but I have no idea where to begin. I'll tell you a really good book is Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Let me see if I can, there it is. Daniel Goleman started this concept of emotional intelligence, or started, writing about it, and it's really about all the soft skills in our life. But this book, I love. I did this. It was at a retreat for my business, and they went over this. What I love about this book is it talks about. So you think about like a little square, okay, with like a little big plus sign. So sort of break it up into 4 blocks, and the first top 2 are about personal. The bottom 2 are social, and it's awareness and management. So personal awareness, personal management. So how am I feeling, and how do I manage those feelings? How do I manage without being a crazy person or, whatever?
You just froze for a couple minutes.
Oh, did I? The internet, I tell you. So did you miss anything there?
So?
Did you miss something? Sorry, you froze a little bit.
No.
I think we're back now. I think we're back. It's all good. But did you miss anything about what I was talking about with the square?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I'll explain it. So think about a square with a plus symbol sort of in the center. So there's 4 blocks. The top 2 are personal. Yeah. Personal awareness. So how am I feeling? Allowing yourself to feel feelings and become aware of them. And then management, personal management. So how am I feeling, and how can I manage those feelings without attacking someone else, or, like really being successful in life, right? Through this personal awareness and personal management. And then the two bottom squares are social awareness. How am I feeling and how are you feeling, right?
Yeah.
And again, you can't always know how everybody's feeling, but starting to really develop those skills of being more aware. What's their body language saying? That kind of stuff. And it's
just a little bit intuitive.
That's right. And I think getting back to listening to your gut a little bit rather than, jumping the gun and assuming you know everything. The other thing is, if you don't know, you can always ask for clarification, right? You can always just suspend. Don't judge other people because you may not know really what's going on, or where. Oftentimes people don't say. Not everything is up front, you know what I mean? Sometimes they'll be in attack mode and you're not recognizing, wow, 2 seconds ago they just got a diagnosis of cancer. And maybe they're in attack mode because they're freaking out. You know what I mean? Like, if you just take every moment with just the little information that you have, you might be totally missing the boat of how you can socially manage that conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And never assume.
Well, and I think, there's a really great quote too that I read one time. It's like, assume that everyone is doing their best. And sometimes I say it's funny. Okay, if that's their best, that's not very good. But okay, that's a judgment. Sorry. But, at the end of the day, it gives you compassion. Or it can start developing the muscle of compassion to recognize if they're doing their best and that is their best to attack me, then maybe they're not coming from a great place. Hurting people hurt people. Happy people don't hurt people. So if you have that, like that, I'm grounded in that. Hurting people hurt people. So if somebody's in attack mode, saying something not nice to you, doing something not nice, they're coming from a space of hurting. And it could be past hurt, could be just recent. You have no idea. It's maybe none of your business. But just know that happy people don't hurt people. Right? So
we just talked about that in my life a couple of weeks ago. And when you said that, because we talk all the time, when you said that though, I thought, I don't know why I didn't think of that before, but it just made me more aware. Yeah. It's the same awareness. Thing
when we started this recording and you said love cannot exist without boundaries, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, I know it because I've learned that. And I have proven to myself that that's true and that comes from that space of self-love. We can't give, we don't have, I said, but what a great reminder. Of all the things I kind of put together, thinking about what we wanted to talk about through this 5 days, that never came up. And not because it's not grounded in my belief system, but I'm so freaking appreciative that you mentioned it. And we need to remind each other, right? Like hurting people.
I love all these little,
I know, like they stick.
That we've taken from our groups that we've been involved with, or workshops or whatever,
and bring them to someone else.
Like it's the first time that you've heard what I might. I really like that.
To me, this is all about tools in the toolbox. And if somebody hears that statement, I want you to know that when Jacob, he went through a whole bullying thing from the beginning of school, into about grade 3. And it was me for those years of really just drilling home with love, planting the seed, helping fertilize that soil by reminders and little places. It wasn't about pushing or imposing my belief, but I wanted him to really develop this deep sense of knowing that hurting people hurt people. This is where bullying comes from. And then one day he came home, he's in the car coming home from school kind of thing. He's like, Mommy, I get it. And I'm like, what do you get? I mean, there's a longer part of this conversation, but he's like, I get it. Hurting people hurt people. I saw the kid that was bullying him. I saw him get bullied in the hall by his older brother today. He's like, I get it. And I got to tell you, from that day on, people tried to bully him or say something, or it's like water off a duck's back. I mean, I'm like, man, if I got that in grade 3, my life would have been changed.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we get these little sayings that have there's so much wisdom in there, and you can apply that to like all aspects of your life, it's like, man, they're great reminders. So I'll just let you know about this book. I don't know if you can see it with the light. there's 4 sections. So there's 4 parts of the square, give you, I think, 10 tools to develop in each of those areas. In the beginning, it talks a little bit about how the brain actually works and that the management stuff. But what was really cool, and I thought this is fascinating, if you're wondering where you're at, in the very back, there was a tearaway page where inside you get a pin, and you go to this website, and it tests you on your emotional intelligence, and it gives you a score in all 4 areas. Then you use the book to go and sort of strengthen the muscle in each of those areas. And then you can go back and do the test and see how you've done. I'm like, to me, that's a great tool. A great tool. And boundaries.
I need to borrow that.
Yeah, anytime. Like it's fantastic. Anyway, so keep going. Let's talk about more boundaries.
Sexual boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
So that would be, protect your comfort level.
Right.
Be, like with sexual touch and activity, like what, where, when, and with whom. That's your right.
Yeah. I mean, that one, it's funny. When we talk about boundaries loosely, many people think of a couple types of boundaries. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes we don't think about all the other areas of our life that we can sort of, and we can establish boundaries as well. Because I'm telling you, it's all the little irritations in life is usually just a boundary stepped over that you were not clear on, so you couldn't establish.
And your feeling at the time will tell you that somebody stepped on your boundary.
100%. I'm telling you, life is your best teacher.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. A lot of people don't want to feel the feelings. So they push it, you push that down. And it's like, so I was talking to a friend the other day, and she said, she went for a walk in a park. She was just, what I wasn't feeling all that great, what I wanted to go for a walk in nature. Knows that makes her feel better. So she went for a walk in a park. And while she was there was a guy walking behind her. And all of a sudden she's like, I just got this deep gut feeling. It was uncomfortable. And so she, beeline for the vehicle kind of thing. She's like, I had to sit there for 10 minutes before I could actually drive away. There was such a deep feeling. And part of this conversation stemmed from the fact that prior, she wasn't very good at listening to her gut. She kind of got away from, and they say this happens with stress, for long periods of time of ignoring your boundaries. Or this serious sense of wanting to people please or worried about what other people think, we cloud our judgment of our own boundaries. So sometimes you don't even know that your gut's trying to tell you something. Like you just sort of start to get disconnected.
And if you've grown up like that too, you may not even realize that it's your right to have boundaries.
100%. 100%. And again, your parents and the teachers that you had, siblings, if they don't have them, they can't give them to you. So don't blame anybody on that. We're adults now, right? We all get to change things now. It is unfortunate sometimes, there's a lot of crap that comes our way when we're young. And it's funny, I was telling Trevor the other night, our brain, through brain development, when we're young, the type of brainwave we actually have in our brain is like a deep meditative brainwave. It's more predominant when we're young. So when the stuff that you actually encounter when you're young goes in almost like hypnosis. And this is where your worldview, all of the sort of that
your values,
inner programming, it all starts when we're really, really young. And then we spend the rest of our life overcoming most of that stuff. I call it unlearning. And that's what I think becoming a mature, fully functioning, healthy, well-adjusted adult is about, is this unraveling and unlearning all the crap messages that came from other people's dysfunctions. And I mean, sometimes well-intentioned, sometimes not, doesn't matter. But we're adults now. We get to choose, and your feelings are going to be your dictator of whether or not you're going in the right direction for you or not.
That's right.
Are there more? Are there more boundaries?
There one more. This is kind of interesting. Spiritual boundaries. So it's around your beliefs and your value system. Like, do you believe in God? Is there a higher power that you believe in?
Yeah.
Like, can you, are you comfortable sharing that? All that stuff. Yeah.
Nice. Well, so yeah, I could go on and on about how people try and impose things in those areas, and that there's a sense of trying to impose guilt or things around that for sure. I mean, we talked about before, right? Politics and religion and sexuality. These are all like, these can be some hot button topics for boundaries, but that's really, really important. And again, it comes down to allowing yourself to get to know yourself and trust, right? Who you are.
That's
and
right.
That's enough. That's enough. And your beliefs are worthy. And again, they'll evolve, and that's okay too. Right?
So here's the question for you, Jennifer. Why do you think it's hard for codependents to set boundaries?
I think there's a lack of sense of knowing themselves.
That would be one.
Yeah, I really do.
Putting others' needs, putting other needs and feelings first.
Yeah, I think that's and I think that comes from, personally, I think that comes from people pleasing,
yes.
or like that whole worried about what other people think, right? Like
yes.
you're concerned about that kind of thing. And it's funny, I know lots of people in codependent relationships. I've probably been in them too. So, again, no judgment. That's a tough one. And codependency, it's amazing how that plays out. It's not pretty. It's so self-destructive. It's terrible.
I think that codependency is in everybody's relationship at one point.
Yeah, and I think that, again, that the strongest trees grow through the strongest winds, and that we are our strongest, best self when we've gone through some struggles. So at the end of the day, life's not going to be all a bed of roses, right? I really do think that we've got to go through some challenges, and the one who goes through the most challenges and comes out the other side wins, let's just say. Like, I think that that's where you get a little closer to your values, right? That, it's how long are you going to resist that discomfort until you really step up and love yourself? And I think we have to go through those things. So codependency would be one of those situations where life is going to provoke the crap out of you until you are so frustrated and annoyed. And some people lose it and become wildly angry. And again, it's still resistance.
Yes.
Wherever you're resisting is exactly where you need to get curious about yourself, not other people, because they say how we do anything is how we do everything. And you may not have a codependent relationship everywhere, but you have those tendencies everywhere, because if that's who you are, that's all you have to bring to your life. So you're inclined to bring that little bit of dysfunction or a lot of dysfunction based on where somebody is, and you're going to bring it to everything. And all you're going to do is drive yourself crazy. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think codependency too is a learned behavior. So I think that if someone grows up in that sort of environment, parents, siblings, it becomes the norm.
Yeah.
So you almost have to. Pardon me?
We like what's comfortable or familiar.
Yes.
So we tend to repeat those patterns, right? If people come from a chaotic, abusive childhood, they're inclined to go get into chaotic, abusive childhood because they're not comfortable and normal. They can't even accept it. They're like,
because it's what they know.
That's right.
And changes a scary thing. So.
It is. It certainly can be. Yeah.
So another reason why it would be hard is because they don't feel that they have the right.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
Worthiness.
And the idea that if they set a boundary, they may jeopardize their relationship.
Yep.
That's the big thing, really.
And you know what's funny? Why are we so afraid to lose toxic relationships? Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
because
just you stop you like, why are we so afraid to let go of relationships or whatever, or experiences or places or whatever, to let that go if it's not good for you? Like, that's not, I guess it's just worthy of sit there and say, my gosh, this person is terrible to me. Like, they speak horrible over my life. They totally undermine my self-confidence, my self-worth, all these things. You're like, why hold on so tight like our attachments, it's crazy, but it happens. And again, I think it comes down to, I think everything is learned.
Yes.
And people learn to stay. And
yes.
that sometimes, again, I know that the change is scary and all that kind of stuff. I think there's like the easy to throw that at it, that it's just like, oh, it's scary to change. But there's more going on.
Oh, that's too late.
We're going to do the bloopers of Cindy's lighting situation.
I almost got it right. There you go.
I know, that was pretty good. Yeah, it's challenging. You've got beautiful light coming in there. I was just saying to Cindy earlier, it's like, just know that you are the light. Come this way. Come over here.
Yes.
I think that it's easy to say. I think we got to get curious about, why is it scary to change? Who do I have to be or become? And that recognizing that you don't have all the answers, but somebody does. Somebody has spent their entire life dedicated to overcoming whatever it is you're struggling with right now. And so there's a book, there's a website, there's a something. Certainly online and things like that, there's lots of opinion too. So be cautious what you get into. It's kind of like, the family doctor. Somebody who's just checking the websites and they can diagnose themselves when you don't necessarily have all the tools to do that. But yeah, if you get curious and, go and find some resources, or again, being around a supportive community that allows you to start to ask those questions. Somebody has literally dedicated their whole life to unraveling and understanding whatever it is that we struggle with, which can be incredible. The support's there. I'm not saying our healthcare system is awesome and the mental health system is there. It's not. I'll say right off the bat, that's a dysfunctional system. But there are tools. There are communities that care. There's lots of places.
There's also something about taking the responsibility of your self-development. Yourself. Like,
I think that's step number one.
I think find what's good for you. Yeah. Find that what works for you. What works for me might not work for you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Probably.
And I talk about that. But I talk about that in, again, I think as you become more and more confident on your journey, you recognize that I recognize the times that I'm most successful in my life. It has been when I've taken perhaps a tool, a concept, an idea, or whatever, and I play with it. I oftentimes don't like it in the beginning. It doesn't fit me yet. But I'll work with it and prod it and get a little more curious and get some more information. Then it's all like, oh, now I figured out how to make that mine.
Yeah.
Because we're not cookie cutters, right? We're all unique.
That's right.
And all it is when someone shares an idea or you read an idea in a book and you're like, I like it. Well, good for you. That's just you stopping flat saying that's all there is to that concept. No, it's like, wow, maybe I can get curious about that and wonder, well, what don't I like about that? And then you start to get to know yourself. You get a little closer to actually knowing what you do like through what you don't like.
That's right.
You have to take responsibility for yourself. You don't have to, but your life won't change. But if you want your life to change, if you actually want to create the life that you want, you have to take responsibility for yourself and that journey. It's not about taking everybody's ideas for what they are and saying that, I either agree or I don't agree. It's not that simple. There's a whole lot of gray in between. But I think, again, that's part of the development is getting to that place. And you just put one foot in front of the other, right? Just be curious and be okay with not knowing for right now. That it's okay to explore it.
And keep adding to your toolbox, because that's the big thing. Like if you have all the...
I say that to you all the time, do I not? I'm like, with regards to health and everything, right? We just need more tools in our toolbox. And that's part of what these conversations are about. Just to be maybe one more tool, maybe one more, what if like a couple words got strung together throughout this conversation that planted a seed in someone's mind that can start them on that journey, then I feel great about this. Either way, this helps us. I love to solidify and expand how I think, like this is just who Cindy and I are. And, if other people want to join us on this too, then fantastic. It doesn't matter where you are on, or where you're at on your journey. There's no right or wrong place if you're on the journey.
That's right.
It's a lot of fun. It really is. Like I say, it's probably one of the most worthy things I've ever done in my life, because it's changed every aspect of my life for the better through taking responsibility, setting up those boundaries. And like I say, there's still times where I'm like, I'm going against my gut. I know it. The voice in my head is telling me.
Once you start practicing your boundaries, you're going to feel less anxiety. You're going to feel less resentment. You're going to feel less guilty. It's all good.
Yeah. Well, it's part of the journey. Again, we have to be okay feeling our feelings, because you aren't your feeling. Like, you aren't your feelings. You're not those emotions per se. They are a guidance system in a sense to say if you're on track or off track, but they're not who you are. They're just going to help you figure out or navigate this life, and you'll either do it successfully or not successfully, or maybe, not so much fun, if you use those feelings appropriately to your betterment, I guess. That's kind of what I want to say. What do you think? Does that make sense?
Yes, and as you're talking, though, I'm thinking to myself, it's the feeling thing would be really good to do with kids too, because kids feel feelings, but they don't necessarily have to know why they're feeling it. Yeah,
and they can't explain it. Like I said, they don't have that language yet sometimes to articulate. Like, adults half the time don't have it.
That could be a topic for another one, Jennifer.
Well, we'll write that down.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that, funny enough, language is another favorite topic of mine. Still a work in progress for me, but being more intentional with the words that I choose. Because there's dismissive language, like, just blah, blah, blah. Or if you, like there's weak language and there's stronger language. And it's funny when you really start to lean in to understand that body language. We have so much control over our communication and articulating ourselves better so that we don't, or are less inclined to misunderstand other people. As you become more aware of how you use language, well or not, you start to recognize, well, maybe they said that just a little crappy. That kind of hit bad. I didn't like what they said, or that hurt my feelings or whatever, but maybe that just wasn't communicated well. Let me just stop for a second. Let me ask a clarifying question and see, where was that coming from? Was somebody's intentions good, but the words poor, whatever. But it's funny how when you do work in different areas of your life, you start to make space for other people to be imperfect, because we're imperfect. And at the end of the day, when we see each other as just doing our best, right?
Yeah.
You're like, holy smokes, does that ever create a lot of space to not be frustrated, to be more loving, to be more understanding, to, you know what I mean? Like, you just create the space for, honestly, the feelings that most people want to feel more of. Not saying temporarily you won't feel some of the other feelings, or maybe even long-term. Someone dies, big things happen. You have no control over life, but you don't have to stay there. So anyway, I think we probably talked long enough about this today. Holy smokes. I think we covered a lot of ground, Cindy.
I'm just wondering if I'm going to read this one little thing, because it's an example of blurred boundaries.
Ooh, I like that.
So, and we talked about boundaries being a learned behavior.
Yeah.
So so if your boundaries weren't valued as a child, then you didn't learn that you had any.
Right.
So any kind of abuse violates personal boundaries, including teasing. So here's an example. This is from, I don't know, another person. It's not me.
Yeah.
For example, but I can see this happening to me.
Yeah.
My brother ignored my pleas for him to stop tickling me until I couldn't barely breathe.
Right.
So this made me feel powerless, and that I didn't have a right to say stop when I was uncomfortable. So when this person was in recovery and did some work on this, she gained the capacity to tell people to stop when she was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So she, like after she did some work on that and realized the uncomfortable feeling was because her boundaries were being crossed by her brother.
Yeah.
But at that time, she was probably too young to even, to know what was going on.
Yeah.
But as she was in recovery, that's, so it's kind of neat to see that happen. Like like it was learned. So you just put up with that, the bullying and
Well, it's funny that you say as you're talking, right? Stimulates more thought in my brain because that's like, it's a constant thing going on here. I love thinking, so there you go. But made me think of just even my parents. And my parents were loving and their intentions were good, but they were very controlling. From whatever environment they came from, my mom, her dad was an alcoholic and, a miserable sort of environment that she grew up in. So she thought if she could control everything, right, that we'd be safe and that, all the right things would happen. And it's not that way at all. Through that control, now granted, I was very much rebellious to that, but at the end of the day, that control still, there's an inner narrative in my head based on trying to please them, but at the same time, trying to please myself. There was a whole bunch of incongruence for me personally growing up of not agreeing with that control and yet not necessarily knowing what it should look like. I had no idea.
Yes.
Right? So it created a lot of blurred lines for me. And that when is it okay to do what's right for you? Like, and both of my parents are now gone. I don't have to answer to anybody. And those voices are still there. So I'll say, it doesn't even matter, right? Like it is interesting, the stuff that happens that creates those blurred lines. But it doesn't matter what created them. What matters is that you are aware of them and that we start doing the work to walk away from that and go towards doing what is right for you. And that knowing that you're worthy and capable of doing that. You might not know how, but the tools are out there. It's just a matter of you recognizing that you're worthy and that just the saying, right? Seek and ye shall find. Everything you need is out there.
And creating your boundary is an act of love towards yourself, and it's an act of love towards the person that you're creating the boundary for.
Yeah.
Because if you let a person cross your boundaries too often, then it becomes a chore to be in a relationship with them. You don't want that.
Do you know part of the healing too? I think of just mom and dad being controlling. Part of my healing and my releasing their thing instead of blaming or, focusing on that negative stuff was in recognizing that I truly believe their intentions were good.
Oh, yes.
And that they were doing the best they knew how to do. Do you know what I mean? And that when I saw them as doing their best, but being imperfect too, right? And recognizing sort of where it kind of came from and just, I guess it takes a lot of judgment out that recognizing, it's not going to be all a bed of roses for me too. Like, I mean, when it trickles down and I become the parent and that you make some choices, it's going to be messy. I always say to Jacob, it's like, I'll pay for the therapy later. Like I just do the best I can with certain things. Some things I think I do really well. And some things at 19 now, I see how they've played out and I see that I've done some things really well and other things it's just, I'll pay for the therapy.
Yeah.
Like we're all just trying. Parenting is tough because we're different people. I was raised in one environment and you can just do what you know as learned behavior, but then you pay for the dysfunction, right? The dysfunction or not based on whatever. And it's like, so it was, for me personally, it was learning a lot of things for the first time for myself, not to how some people overcompensate for kids that have terrible childhoods. You know what I mean? Sometimes they try and give their kids everything. That's not good either. Right? Like that kind of, that's a whole dysfunction in itself. But I didn't want to sort of go from this all the way over here. So controlling to being not controlling at all, like just free for all, trying to find what's right. That's a whole navigation thing that I think that takes a lifetime to figure out what that is. And that'll be different for every parent and child situation too. So, man, we have covered a lot of ground. I can't even believe it. What were you going to say? Sorry.
No, I was going to say it's different. I mean, it's different with you and your child, but it's also different with each child.
Absolutely. I only have one,
What?
but I totally agree. No dope, because again, everybody is born into a different birth order, right?
That's right.
After every 5 years, they say you start a whole new birth order. So if you had, like, my sisters are 5 years older than me, they're twins. So they were never alone, right? So there's a whole dynamic I don't even get. But then 5 years later, we start a new birth order. I'm actually like an only child, or the oldest if there had been more, and there wasn't. So it's interesting. So I have sisters that are, in a sense, so they weren't only children, but they were the oldest. And then, in fact, I was raised kind of like an only child. And then you bring this crazy dynamic together, and it creates a lot of interesting dynamic. Like, it's fascinating. And learning styles and argument styles and communication styles. And you bring all of these pieces of the pie together, and it's fun. Communication.
The birth order has always intrigued me.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't, like, what are you talking about? Like, never thought of those things as how people get along. And I remember doing a training one time about, I think it was personality style. Some people are peacocks. They like to be seen, and, all the kind, they're loud. And then you get the owls who are kind of wise and thoughtful, and they listen, and you get all these different personality styles together. Try and communicate to do that effectively. You got to take a course for that. Like, you know what I mean? And families don't necessarily have those tools, and schools certainly don't teach this stuff. And so, yeah, it's like, man, we're going through life, the majority of our life, with no tools in our toolbox, and literally, hitting in the dark, kind of like, it's interesting. But anyway.
Our toolboxes are not empty.
I've been feeling it forever.
Yeah.
So, fascinating topic. I hope we've stimulated a lot of thought, because, like I say, we've covered a lot of ground. I love this topic. I think Cindy and I could go on and on and on and on, but we'll shut this off for now. And
please feel free to comment.
Always.
Ask questions.
What stuck out to you? Was there anything here that was like an aha, or like, oh my gosh, I want more on that, or let's explore this, or what do you think of that? Like, just anything. We want to hear from you guys, because honestly, like, this is something we're passionate about, but always willing to grow and expand and add new things to that. So, and like I said, we're going to talk about a lot of comments and stuff on the Friday, the 5th day of the event, but certainly we can weave that in throughout too. So, and we can have conversations in the comments and whatnot. So, anyway, so we'll chime off, and we'll see you for the next video. Hope you guys have a great day.
Have a great day.